Hi guys, my name is Felicia.
And I'm Stacey.
And this is Pretty Culture. Well, today we will be talking about Christian privilege. And it is a hot button topic. It's a controversial topic, but here in the U.S., especially what has gone on in the politics recently, we can't ignore it. So after discussion with Stacey, we sat and talked about it, and there was also a video on YouTube. We decided to talk about Christian privilege. If you would like to, there is a video. It's called Laying Down the Imaginary Cross, Christian Privilege in the U.S. And I personally like it because it's very, it's concise in the fact that it just lists different things that people may go through on the daily basis. It kind of makes it really tangible. But it lists different things that go on in a person's life on a daily basis that will allude to Christian privilege. And I personally like it because sometimes people are blind to privilege. Mm-hmm. I understand there are people that definitely know that they're privileged, but there are also sometimes people are just blind to it because in the U.S. we can kind of be conditioned to things. We're so used to things. We don't really understand or we don't really know that we actually have a privilege in something and somebody else on the other side of the fence may feel isolated about it. Some of the examples were my faith is taught as mythology and mm-hmm. yours is taught as theology. Others had to do with symbolism, like for example, and I know for sure, like I've gone in Walmart and I can see crosses with like mm-hmm. faith, hope, and love, and then other people may look for crafts for their, faith, and they can't find it. There are novelty stores, things like that, especially when holidays and working. I thought that was a big deal because for holidays, we can pretty much rest assured we know what holidays we're going to get off. There are going to be specials. There are going to be all types of symbols for the holidays. And the thing is, it's not that those are bad things. It's just the fact that everyone, if we're, land of the free and we're supposed to have freedom of choice, and you're supposed to have the freedom of religion and also freedom from it, then everybody isn't being, I guess, catered to, if that's the word you want to use. And in my personal life, I just try to, you have to in some way as the government, I understand in our personal life we can choose, but as the government, we have to in a way aim to remain as neutral as possible, because when you decide to sway towards one group or the other, it places the faith on a hierarchy. Like you say, this faith is better than that one's better than this one is more important than that one, once you start swaying on who you're going to support or not. And so, with the holidays, I know it's a big deal because the holidays just wrapped up, and I know I really appreciated it because at my job for a week, we just exchanged gifts, and people were of different faiths. There are Christians, there are people that didn't ascertain to any faith at all. There were people that were like, spiritual, they believe in God, but I call them like floaters or whatever. There were people that were like Jewish. So it's just like we all shared, we all talked, we were all able to celebrate whatever we want to, what we didn't want to. We just enjoyed the holidays together. And I know there's just one sphere that we did that. I know that's just my job, but I just imagine what if this attitude can be taken all over as opposed to just, we always see the Christmas specials or things like that. And I know that is a part of history, but times are changing, people are changing, things are evolving. And also we are actually supposed to have, freedom of religion and freedom from it. And it kind of negates that if there's one group that's mm-hmm. more privileged than the other. And like I said, sometimes people don't understand that they're privileged. They don't know that there are groups out there isolated that have to take off from work. You have the type of job where you have to take off of work just so you can celebrate and acknowledge your faith's holiday. But for many people, you don't have to take off for Sunday. You don't lose money for, mm-hmm. Taking off on a Sunday because you already have it off. Or you can rest assured that store is going to be closed on Easter. You can rest assured that y'all not going in on Christmas. But there are so many other people who want to celebrate holidays, and they have to go in. They got to get up at 8. Mm-hmm. They got to go commute, And so like I said, sometimes we can be blind to privilege. But when we're made aware of it, what do we do?
Yeah. And so the counter argument to that would be that sometimes Christians receive, that they don't have that they have lost, maybe lost is a better word, way to put it, they have lost certain privileges because as she talked about interfaith dialogue, sometimes in those conversations, Christianity is not as
received well
because in some histories, Christians have been dominating, and they have done not Christ-like things. Yes. So because of that, sometimes Christians do not have the same, I guess, equal voice when it comes to interfaith dialogue. And in addition to the Christian agenda, I guess you could say, of conversion, of trying to share their faith with other people. So sometimes that's not received well. So the counter argument to, the whole Christian privilege would be that sometimes Christians don't receive some of the same privileges. It's, in particular, one example I can think of is in Afrocentric discourse. To be a Christian sometimes can be looked down upon because that would be the religion of your enslaver.
Oppressor.
Right.
You're still slave-minded because if you choose to be Christian.
Right. So while Christians have privileges, Christians may also receive some backlash from that. And then while we're talking about Christian privileges, we're particularly speaking of in the United States, because we're completely aware that in other parts of the world, Christians are persecuted daily. But while Christians are persecuted in other parts of the world, we want to make sure that we don't in turn persecute people of other religions within the United States.
And that's how you can go from, it can be Christian privilege, but also it's the privilege of power.
Right.
Whenever you see a group in power having too much power, they don't even realize, and sometimes they do, but they put their foots on the necks of other people. Mm-hmm. And so that's the issue. But I also wanted to go back to what you said about interfaith dialogue not having the freedom. I think there's a difference. In interfaith dialogue is supposed to be a place. It's a space that's created so people can talk. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that Christians don't have space to talk in interfaith dialogue. I would say it's social. I would say it's way more social. There are things that you're just not supposed to say that aren't PC. So maybe in social interactions, communicating with people, there's stuff that, will offend somebody. In interfaith dialogue, that's the space that you are supposed to talk about.
Yeah, I know that in interfaith dialogue, that's the space where you talk about things. But if certain religions have that openness to other religions, where it's like, they might have people of the book, those type of theologies, or things that are more open, and then Christianity is kind of
closed because your conversion there is one way,
right? So I think that sometimes in that sense, because of the theology of Christianity, they might not be as accepted in interfaith dialogue, where the aim may be to everyone to all get along, and then you have
and then that too.
And so I think that's kind of one of the things you got to kind of think about, like, what is tolerance and what is, standing by your faith versus tolerance. Like, if you believe a certain thing, you want to stand by that, but you do want to be tolerant
and what you're talking about is on the individual basis. Like,
right.
It's going to take the individual.
Right.
Because everybody's not going to see that. Somebody is going to be with interfaith dialogue. For the perfect example, the example I'm thinking of now, there's a place in Houston, and I encourage you all to go. It's called the Rothko Chapel, and it's a museum, but it's also an interfaith space. It's not for any one particular denomination. Anybody can go there, a person of faith or not of faith. You can go and pray and all this stuff. And so just look it up. It's good information. Mm-hmm. But they had an interfaith program there, and it was, I believe it was about Hinduism. And it was the Muslim one. There was one about Islam, and they were doing Islamic meditation. And there were people in the audience, of course, of different faiths and of the Islamic faith. And one of the Christian men got up and he made this comment, and he was like, I really appreciate this. I learned so much. And he was like, I always try to tell my Christian friends that, there's this same God. We just interpret him differently and all this stuff. And he made this comment, and I just felt like, wow, that was really powerful and really bold. And whether you agree or disagree with him, there are spaces that provide this. And he felt this way individually. Like, he individually felt that we all have our own interpretations of God. He just prescribed to the Christian faith. There are other people who prescribe to the Christian faith and say, no, there is one God, da-da-da-da. So I think what you're talking about is on an individual basis, because everybody is just not going to think the same. And that's why I go back to politics. Like, we should, as a governmental organization, I know individually people are going to have their own opinions. But as a government, we should try to remain neutral, because I can't force you to think anything. And especially if I'm supposed to, like, this is supposed to be
which brings
freedom,
to me, which
like,
makes me think of with the government organization, prayer in the schools. Prayer in the schools is something that generally, you know, some Christians support, particularly from a political point of view, evangelical Christians support. But in my point of view, you know, you don't necessarily want prayer in the schools, because I think our country is more diverse than we're ready to deal with. So if at my school right now, if we had prayer in the schools and I lived in certain parts of Houston, that prayer might not be to Jesus Christ. And then how does that make you feel? Because the prayer is not in your favor, right? So when we're not...
Like we're saying, if you're in a predominantly Jewish community, or if you're in a predominantly Asian community, or whatever that is, but yet your prayer is not...
it's not the same prayer that you want. So prayer in the schools may be something that's good, because taking prayer out to schools takes out your children being influenced in the way that you may not want to be. But we automatically assume that prayer in the schools equals Christian prayers. Right. But what if the prayer in the school was not Christian? Then what's next? Like, then what's, you know?
It either has to be, it has to be those absolute things. Right. Like, it has to be either no prayer or all prayer. Like, whoever wants to pray. You know, like, it can't just be like prayer and then underline it with...
It has to be a Christian prayer. Like, right. If prayer was put back in the schools and the parents of the school were able to vote what prayer it was, and you were in the minority and it was not a Christian prayer to your God, then what happens next?
And I have one last I know my last point, and it's only because I'm working on research right now. I'm so tired. But language. Language is such a big deal. And what I'm learning is just working on my thesis topic, because I am studying voodoo, and I've looked into like Hinduism and stuff like that, the language, and the part on the video laying down, laying down the imaginary cross, the one we talked about, he made a point to say, you know, mine is taught as theology and yours is taught as mythology. And I really like that point, because it was something that I didn't even, you know, realize until it was brought up. But language is a big deal with privilege too, because those aren't the only words used. Like, mine is theology, yours is mythology. Mine is catching the Holy Ghost, you're possessed. Or mine is prophecy, and you're hallucinating. So it's like we use language also to condemn other people and to, you know, put down other things. And we say, no, we're all equal. But then we turn around and use this language, and it just proves like...
Yeah, like, you know, pagan is primitive, like all those
pagan,
words.
That's indigenous, that's primitive, that... You know,
those words aren't,
So, we just want to know what you guys think. This is just surface area, actually. This topic can go on all day, but I guess I just really wanted to, you know, drive in the whole interfaith, and it's almost like an all or nothing. Like, we're here together in the U.S., and like I always say, I know we can't hold hands and sing Kumbaya and all be peaceful and loving and all this other stuff, but things are changing. There's interracial relationships, interfaith relationships. We go to school, like, there's desegregation, so I can go to school where I want to, go to college anywhere. People are traveling here for study abroad, working overseas, so people's minds are changing, and things are so diverse. And so I think being in the country that we're in, being in the type of country that we're in, we just have to accept all, because once you start swaying here or there and tearing things off and putting it on a hierarchy, like as we've learned through history, whenever somebody has just absolute power, you kind of...
Well, you don't have to necessarily accept all, but you should treat all.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, treat all fairly. Everybody should have the same equality, because why would, you know, one group with absolute power has proven itself to be detrimental in history. Whether it's culture, religion, geography-wise. So,
all right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in.